Good evening, guys. Welcome to Saturday night's edition of Pontificating with Pete on Revolutionary Change. Hope you guys are all doing well. Hope it's been a great week. It's certainly been good for Jen and I. We just passed 78,000 subscribers. So, yeah, we're 22,000 away from that silver plaque. So we appreciate all of you being here. And if you want to help us get a step closer, you could do a couple of things for us right out of the box. You can smash that like button. You can make sure you're subscribed, and you can share the stream out to everyone that you know. Also, what you could do, if you're so inclined, see that QR code right above? That is to support the Revolutionary Change Pack. Now, as you know, our channel is dedicated to unraveling this unholy alliance between the United States of Israel and making it the United States of America once more, before it's too late. And so if you are so inclined to support, we certainly hope that you'll go over there and check it out and learn a little bit more about the PAC, the fact that Jen and I completely control the funds. There is no consultant class. This is not going through DC. Yes, there is ActBlue. That is one of the payment processing options. It's not the only one. So keep that in mind, and we certainly appreciate any and all support that you guys can provide for us there. This evening, I am actually going to have a guest at the top of the hour. It will be Clyde Bosch. If you guys are not familiar with him, make sure you check him out on Instagram. I believe links are in the description. In addition to that, the reason why he and I had linked up in the first place is because he is friends with Anthony Aguilar, who is somebody I am proud to call a friend today as well. And so that will be an interesting conversation. Hope you guys, again, are all doing well this evening. We've got several stories that we're going to get to. And of course, when it comes to the sort of deep dives that we have been doing, we're going to do another one tonight. I did not put it in the description, but it is going to be the final story this evening. Now, I know a lot of you really enjoyed my dissecting of Andrew Colvett, and I'm sure there will be more to come with him as we go forward. There is also somebody else who is involved in this whole fiasco cover-up that is going to be worth talking about, and that is Josh Hammer. Josh Hammer is somebody who I personally thought had something going on that not enough people were talking about, because I always felt that when it came to the demise of Charlie Kirk, one of the things that really pushed the Zionazis over the edge was when he had the last rendition of the Turning Point USA conference, and he ended up having some people there voicing their opinions regarding the state of Israel that the Zionazis did not like. And that, of course, was Dave Smith being one of the most prominent. And Dave Smith wasn't alone. He ended up debating somebody in particular regarding the topic, and that person was Josh Hammer. So that is going to be at the end of the show. Are we going to talk about the No Kings rally? No, at least not alone. I will be talking about the No Kings rally for a minute with Clyde when he gets here later this evening. Remember, the key to remember here, folks, when it comes to things like the No Kings rally, if you really want to make an impact, you do not ask for permission to do a march or to do a rally. That's for the libs who are comfortable and are not willing to rock the boat. You know what type of disruption you do if you actually want to make change? Get on a flotilla over to Gaza. That's real disruption. What these individuals did this afternoon is what you do for shits and giggles and to make yourself feel better inside. Not that you would actually do anything to make a difference. If you want to talk about kings in this country, Donald Trump is the furthest thing from a king. Jeff Bezos is a king. Bill Gates is a king. Mark Zuckerberg is a king. Elon Musk is a king. Those are your kings. Those are the people who rule the roost. And if you want the queen, you better aim and not miss. That's Miriam Adelson. Probably the worst one of all. Speaking of a person who absolutely loves, and I mean loves, kings and queens, because he's nothing more than a pawn, although he thinks he's a rook or a knight. You know, I don't like talking about Bill Maher, but I think it is imperative that we do, because there is a lot of context that I think is getting missed here as to why Bill has become so much of a annoying son of a bitch, be the best way to describe him. Now, he personally, for me, is someone that I used to watch for years, including back when he was doing Politically Incorrect, and then ultimately when he started doing Real Time with Bill Maher. There was a time where Bill was good, and then he wasn't. And I would say of all the moments where I look back on Bill Maher and saw the full transformation into a complete shitlib was when he initially supported Bernie's run for president in the summer of 2015, had him on the show. They had a sit-down interview, wanted to talk about the necessity of language when it comes to appealing to the masses, particularly about the stigma of socialism. And at the time I thought, wow, Bill really cares. Bill's really trying to make a difference. It turns out that shortly thereafter, Bill got his talking to and he got his mind right. Well, he could not help himself with his show last night. This is a statement that he decided to put out regarding Israel-Palestine. Now, there is another layer to this that not many people are talking about, and we're going to get to it. But first, brace yourself. Bill Maher's about to speak.
The Jews' homeland. And Jews have always lived there. You can look it up. It's in this book called the Bible. It says the Jews built a temple with a really big wall 7 centuries before Muhammad or Islam ever existed. And sure as shit, you can still go there and touch it. Calling Jews colonizers in Israel is like calling Native Americans colonizers here. It's ridiculous.
Now, I don't know what you think is so ridiculous about it, because there is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and it has been displayed even in places like Grok, which I will point out to you all right now if you're not familiar with this. You know, I'm not saying that Grok has all the answers. I would never pretend that in an organization like that knows everything about anything. But here's what they do know. Modern Palestinians share 70 to 80% of the Y chromosomes that match with ancient Canaanites, Israelites, and this is from the Times of Israel, 2024. Ashkenazi Jews have about 30 to 50% Levantine ancestry, with over 80% maternal lines in Europe. Vast differences show Palestinians closer to Bronze Age Levantines, e.g. the Megiddo samples, than Ashkenazis, who cluster nearer Europeans. Thus, Palestinians are genetically closer to ancient Judeans than the modern Israelis. But hey, what does Grok know? Bill Maher's talking. He knows a lot of things about things.
To mark the October 7th anniversary, we must launch a campaign to educate young Americans about the Middle East. And the way I'd like to begin that process is by addressing an open letter to Chapel Roan, a great new recording artist who, like a Hezbollah pager, is really blowing up.
To even make a joke about that is the type of thing that only a privileged shitlib could possibly come up with, because, again, one of the reasons that I am so hypercritical of this political class of people is that they are the most obvious creatures of comfort. They desire to feel comfortable at all costs, which is why the liberal was always the great warning from someone like Ben Franklin, who always said, anyone who is willing to give up liberty for security deserves neither. And if there's one thing we've learned, especially since 9/11, is that liberals, because of their status, will always assume that those beneath them will suffer before they do, and they are all too ready, willing, and able to allow them to suffer as a result, which is why Bill Maher says the heresy that he speaks of. Not just because he doesn't know jack shit about Israel or its history, but also because he is so ready, willing, and able to throw innocent Palestinians under the bus now for political and economic purposes. And I'm going to get to that in a minute, but we'll continue.
Chapel, if you think it was repressive growing up queer in the Midwest, try the Mideast. Chapel, did you know that for 2,000 years, Palestine was like an Uber driver with a 3-star rating? Nobody wanted it.
Again, that's not true. It has been whitewashed, Western style, out of history. Anyone who knows anything about Palestine, especially prior to 1948, would know that it was also a safe haven for many Jews during the Holocaust. In addition, it was a very flourishing part of the Middle East. It bloomed despite what the Zionazis would have you believe. It has bloomed for centuries. You only need look online, look up Palestine 1946, 1944, 1910, and you will see just how prosperous this supposed land for people without a land actually was way back when. Now, Bill Maher in particular is such a ogre of a human because, like many shitlibs, especially of the boomer generation, they fancy themselves as smarter than everybody else. And even if they're wrong, they have an excuse as to why they're wrong. And it will never be because you're right. So when he speaks, he's speaking from a very confident position without any leg to stand on. Almost like somebody we know of, don't we?
And there was never any Arab country called Palestine. Chappell, you're not wrong that oppression is bad, or that Palestinian and many other Muslim populations are oppressed and deserve to be freed. You just have it completely ass backwards as to who is doing the oppressing. Hamas is a terrorist mafia that took over Gaza. These are the oppressors. And when
No, actually, one person's oppressor is another person's freedom fighter, in case you haven't noticed. But the thing that Bill Maher still refuses to acknowledge is that Israel has done anything wrong. I saw somebody who was, his name is Blanchard Lynch or something. He was speaking on Dad Saves America podcast earlier and seemed to have a few decent points until eventually he got to the point where he said that it was Hamas that attacked Israel, and that's how everything started on October 7th. And Bill Maher still buys into that bullshit. I don't even know if he buys into it or not. I just think Bill Maher is a colonizing supremacist who believes in Western hegemony, and he knows that it's good for business if he continues to espouse this message, even with 750,000 people mass murdered. So he'll keep going. There is nothing in his way that's going to stop him. There is something that could stop him, but I highly doubt that that's going to happen. And we're going to discuss that in a minute as we finish this out.
When you make it all about Israel, you take the pressure off of them. You enable them. Gender may not be binary, but right and wrong kind of is.
Well, you are very wrong, Billy Boy. And part of the reason I think that Bill Maher has gone down this road, I had an epiphany that I shared with Jen earlier, and I 1000% believe it now. Bill has been on this trajectory for quite some time. And I often suspected, as has been the case in many elements of the failures of capitalism, that eventually we would hit a point where the powers that be would consolidate so much wealth and power that there would be no way that you could question them if you are under their umbrella. It's no different than what's happened with other people who we don't have to name, but you know who I'm referring to, that ultimately took the corporate money from very, we'll say, dangerous entities. When they decided they didn't want to take it anymore, well, we saw what happened. And the same is probably true for somebody like Bill. And the reason I bring this up, and the reason why anybody should care, if those are not aware of what is currently happening at HBO, it's very similar to what just happened at TikTok. It's what's happened now at CBS News. And it is ultimately what is going to, again, until it's official, it's not official, but let's just assume that it will be. HBO, Warner Brothers, and CNN will be taken over by the Ellisons. Yes, they say it's David Ellison, but he's Nepo Boy, and his daddy, Larry Ellison, who is the biggest funder of the IDF in the world, is buying HBO. And so by doing that, Bill Maher, as one can imagine, because his career comes first above everything else, is going to want to be in the good graces of these now modern day Murdochs, if you will. And so this is where we are. This is what has come to pass. New CBS owner David Ellison met with top Israeli general in scheme to spy on Americans. Now, when you take over all of these major media companies, at least however major it is for the time being, you are going to continue to get people in line. And if you do not find satisfaction in what they're doing, well, we all know what's going to happen next. They're going to be on the chopping block. The most obvious example, the most obvious juxtaposition, I would say, in terms of personalities that have shows on HBO, there's two that come to mind. There's Bill Maher and there's John Oliver. And as we've seen with John Oliver's content, he will at least be given a talking to. Bill Maher is not going to have to do anything, much like any of our elected officials on both sides of the aisle. Some are cheap whores, some are expensive whores. But at the end of the day, the Israel lobby knows who's there to play ball and who isn't. And so in the case of Bill Maher, he is making it very clear that he is there to play ball, which is why he's going to continue to say what he is saying, because $20 million a year in Palestinian blood money is definitely worth it for Bill Maher, which is why he's going to say that, and he is letting them know that he is ready. He is ready by just saying what needs to be said. But this does present a little bit of an interesting conundrum here, because now it's being brought to everybody's attention that David Ellison is part of the Mossad, clandestine operations, spying on Americans. And we all know this guy is not loyal to America. Bill Maher is loyal to David Ellison, and he will be even more so once they take over the network. But I would say that this bit of information is pretty disturbing. In one of the scariest moments in modern history, we're doing our best at ScheerPost to pierce the fog of lies that conceal, but we need some help. And of course, we are here to plug them. And so, giving a shout out, of course, to a gentleman who we would love to have on the show at some point. Max, you know we want you here, baby. So from Wyatt Reed and Max Blumenthal at the Gray Zone, the new owner of Paramount, David Ellison, participated in an Israeli government-led plot to surveil and suppress pro-Palestine activists in the U.S., leaked emails show. Originally dubbed 12 Tribes, a reference to the dozen Jewish billionaires solicited to underwrite the operation. The scheme sought out American faces to fund surveillance firms run by Israeli intelligence veterans on behalf of Tel Aviv, as it targeted American citizens participating in the BDS movement. The emails documenting the foreign influence campaign to counter BDS were first identified by journalist Jack Polson, who discovered them in a trove leaked by the Handala Hacking Collective in 2024. The files show former IDF minister Benny Gantz was tasked with recruiting wealthy Westerners to fund surveillance firms operated by Israeli intelligence veterans as they stalked and harassed people whom the government of Israel suspected of harboring pro-Palestine sympathies. If this is not a throwback to McCarthyism, I don't know what the fuck is. In the emails, Hollywood talent agency executive Adam Berkowitz identified Ellison as very interested in helping out with undermining the BDS movement. Berkowitz introduced Ellison to the Israeli general. Talk about a fucking turncoat for the American people. Remember that name, Adam Berkowitz. Benny, meet David. David, meet Benny. Berkowitz wrote on December 23rd, 2015. So they've been doing this for a long time, explaining that he told David briefly about Gantz's 12-tribe idea, where you can expound onto him, in which he seemed very interested in. So you see, guys, these changes, these multi-level changes to our country, they don't just happen overnight. They happen over several years. So everything makes sense in terms of a timeline. Hey, Bill, the Ellisons are getting HBO at some point. Keep that in mind if you're thinking about, changing your tune about any of these topics. Well, he got his mind right. That's for sure. And so the document Also listed other hyper-wealthy Zionist activists as potential 12 tribe members, but we will first acknowledge those that are on it. Oracle founder and friends of the IDF board, Larry Ellison, Israeli-American billionaire and top Democratic Party sugar daddy, Chaim Saban, and Google founder Sergey Brin, whose Israel support was still to be determined. And of those named, book chain owner Heather Reisman has agreed to donate. And so other individuals who seem to be a part of this cabal that's growing and probably still is, Eli Broad, 5.7 billion, real estate giant, philanthropist, full-on rapist, supporting pro-Israel causes. Selmo Nissenbaum, art collector. You want to talk about one of the best ways to hide money and to cheat the government and to get away with serious crimes. Art collection is one of the most, if not the most lucrative way to do it. Partner of personnel, Investimos, since 2008, director of UHF Incorporated, and supports Weizmann Institute. Dorothea Steinbrook, 5.8 billion, steel tycoon heir. Safra family, Kevin Burmeister, tech innovator, real estate investor, full-on rapist, founding investor of Skype. Frank Lowy, co-founder of Westfield Group, operator of over 100 shopping centers in Aussie land, New Zealand, the US, and the UK, net worth 4.6 billion. Anthony Pratt, a net worth of 7.1 billion, packaging. Edward Kuckerman, French-Israeli businessman. The Rothschild family. I don't have to comment on that one. Lord Stanley Fink, net worth 180 million. Oh, that's it. Lord, how do you have a name like Lord and only 180 million to your name? You got to catch up. Sir Ronald Cohen, British businessman and political figure, known as the father of British venture capitalism. I'm not even going to touch that one. You guys can make your own judgments. Lord George Weidenfeld, British publisher, philanthropist, newspaper columnist, and pro-Israel supporter. And finally, Paju Zablukowicz, Finnish-born, London-based business magnate, investor, art collector, and pro-Israel philanthropist. One of the main supporters of UK pro-Israel group BICOM. I'd imagine that guy's given Tommy Robinson quite a few bucks, or quite a few shingles, I should say. Those afforded the dubious honor of being selected donated $1 million to the official Israeli propaganda slush fund, would be anointed one of the 12 tribes of Israel, all of whom would be guided directly by the Israeli government, according to a promotional document. An image from internal promotional documents, the 12 tribes of Israel, who would be represented by a dozen Western billionaires. The slide was machine translated by Google. Funding for this initiative shall be provided by an exclusive group of the 12 most influential Jewish philanthropists, symbolizing the 12 Jewish tribes. Israel's government shall act as a 13th facilitating tribe. What you have here is a systematic takeover of our country that's been going on for a while. It didn't just happen yesterday. Now, part of the reason why I think it's accelerated to such an extent as to terms of where we are right now, I believe, has a lot to do with Milikowski's position, and he decided he wasn't going to be protecting these clandestine operations the way he once did. Who the hell knew about this stuff? I didn't know about it. So we'll finish it out here, but here are the final statements that I think are of considerable importance. The same was true with the restitution of Jewish property. There needs to be something less governmental. This is a phenomenon that grows from below, and it is not right to approach it from above. This will not be a covert project, but the connection to the state and the government needs to be very controlled. There are lost arenas that will never be conducted in a business-like manner. We need to see whether to act against the slanderers or against the slanders. The type of body and its connection to the government are actually one issue. With the funding from the 12 tribes, Israel would deploy state-of-the-art cyber tech as a soft weapon through firms like Black Cube, the notorious Israeli intelligence cutout best known for stalking the accusers of disgraced Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein. And as you can see here, I know it's very hard to see, but it's a who's who of Israelis running Black Cube. And what this shows us all, ladies and gentlemen, as it comes full circle, The email exchanges also offer a glimpse into the early stage of David Ellison's emerging role as one of Silicon Valley's top Israel enforcers. It's a role he was seemingly born to play, given the zeal displayed by his billionaire father, Larry Ellison, in defending the apartheid state. So there you have it. And that's how we got here. And that's why the likes of, we'll say, Bill Maher is one example. There are plenty others, to be fair. But this is an example of how the systemic takeover of our institutions have come about as a result of us not properly dealing with the state of Israel. And now, because it has spilled over into such dramatic effect, we are now faced with having to unwind this unholy alliance. But as many people would think, oh, David Ellison just popped up out of nowhere. No, he didn't. He was on the scene over a decade ago. But we didn't know that that was what was going on. It is only as a result of what has been going on as of late that is showing us exactly why we need to disassemble this relationship forever. And if that means we have to highlight people, take with that what you will, but yes. And we have to put our differences aside. That is the only way we are ever going to deal with this. I am upset, but I am not at all surprised. That's the difference. Being upset, but not being surprised that this is how deep this goes. It's not one person. It's a fleet. It is a systemic takeover. We used to hear constantly about, ooh, the Russians are here. Well, we are seeing an example of a rogue nation commit McCarthyism on our people, and the people who run our government are gleefully going along with it. Now, if you ask me, that's as treasonous as it gets. That is deliberate, clandestine operation against your own people. That's pretty bad. And while we are wondering how the hell are we going to compete with China economically, that it seems like at this moment, it's like the least of our concerns. It shouldn't be. We should be competing with China. That's what we should be doing. But the reason we're not doing it is because we are overrun by these neocon, shitlib, scumbag, elitist cabal of people that do not give a damn what happens to the United States, because there was a movie many years ago called Network, which showed beyond any doubt, to those that really run the show, there are no nations. It's just, where can I get my money and where can I build my power? We've allowed these people for far too long to get away with it. It is our job now to disassemble that relationship. If we do not, we're going to find ourselves watching these other situations unfold without properly dealing with them. And there are people that have much bigger platforms than Jen and I do that are using it to protect this genocidal state and its unholy alliance that it has formed within our country. And I don't believe we should be sitting idly by as that happens. One of those people who's doing that is Jack Posobiec. I have never discussed him once on this show before, but I have to discuss him now because it's obvious what he's up to. Because I want anyone who actually follows him to understand exactly what he's doing here when he tries to insinuate this idea that the patsy is still the person who's responsible for what happened to Charlie Kirk in Utah just over a month ago. So he's still going with it. Why? There's only one reason why. He's in the club. He's on the payroll. So here's what he decided to put out there. And then we're going to see the counter argument to what he's doing.
That is on that roof. Does that line up that you guys uncovered with that? Was that that he's using that stick camera? Does that line up with the video from where we see the individual that they've identified as Tyler Robinson?
Yes, and we know that for two reasons. The first time I went out, 2 weeks after Charlie had passed, the FBI actually had a yellow measuring tape that was taped to the cement wall of the Losi building. And I believe that they were measuring the hand to the last bit of that. You can also tell there's a split in the window pane just below this frame when you see him jump off. And you can see that it lines up exactly with where he comes off the building. The other thing you'll notice, Jack, is see that dust? There's no other markings on there. The only place that there were markings up and down all of that guttering system is right where Tyler Robinson jumped off.
There is no proof that Tyler Robinson was on that roof. You're telling me almost 6 weeks later, you now have a palm print that you can identify was Tyler Robinson's? How do we know that when he was indicted, he didn't have his palms fingerprinted, handprinted? How do we know that somebody didn't go and put that right up there on the roof? Look what I found. I found the Carcano rifle that shot the President of the United States. I found the palm print that proves that Tyler Robinson shot Charlie Kirk with a .30-06, by the way. The only reason that somebody would do something of this nature, bring on a guy, a spook, to say, I found the palm print. Why would you believe that? What exactly gives you the idea that this is what actually happened? There has been nothing to this point that has suggested that this is what happened. But instead, Jack Posobiec is proving once again that this is not about the truth. This is not about actually uncovering what really went down. And everyone who here knows that I don't love Charlie Kirk. Not at all. I respected his grift. He was great at it. He was a real leader. No two ways about it. And yes, I do believe that he was having an attack of conscience regarding his faith and the direction that his organization was going. And he was not having it, which is why the last topic tonight you guys are going to want to stick around for, we're going to dissect Josh Hammer. Jack Posobiec is proving once and for all that anyone who's a part of Shitlibbery or Conservative Inc. that is not going right for the throat, no pun intended, when it comes to this issue, as far as I'm concerned, if they're not on the take, they're a dupe. They should be. Don't give it up for free. At least get paid. But Posobiec has a pretty big platform. And perhaps that platform would be in danger if he didn't play along and continue to espouse this idea that the patsy's the one who really did it. And the only reason that would be the case is if you're trying to cover something up. But he has a little more to say.
So when I saw this, I was like, wow, okay, that is a huge piece of evidence. And we were told in the paperwork that was submitted for the legal briefing that they have a palm print, that they have fingerprints on a screwdriver. They're going to have the gun. So then what I started doing, I started working with forensic experts to understand ballistics, to understand how they would use X-rays to follow the path of the bullet through Charlie's body, where the bullet was found, how they found the fragments. I'm not an expert in all of this, but I'm really good at asking questions.
Well, there you have it. He's not an expert. He's actually a moron, but he asks a few good questions. And maybe you'll be willing to buy it. But I think we've got a smart audience here. We've got 500 of you watching. If you haven't smashed that like button yet, please make sure that you do. Let's get to 600 live viewers while we're at it. I don't think for 1 second, that this guy believes anything he's saying. I think it's scripted. I think he was told what to say, and he's going right along with it. He's got that hairstyle that reminds me of that movie. I can't remember the name of it. It's a black and white movie from, it's like the hair is like really, he's like electrocuted. Somebody in the chat's going to know what I'm talking about. Steve and Posobiec, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. And I'm going to show you why it's bullshit. Johnny Bravo. There you go. Thank you. So here's why this is bullshit. You guys saw that we highlighted some information the other night directly from James Lee, friend of the show. We're here to give James Lee another shout out. Here is what he had to say. This is his second part series about the direct connection between Charlie Kirk and Israel regarding the assassination.
Heard. Once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, 3 times is enemy action.
That's the medical examiner. It is a woman named Dr. Deidre Weiss Amaro, and she blew in from California. She was announced as the new state medical examiner in May of 2024. So I'm interested in learning as much as I can about this medical examiner. I'd like to know more about this medical examiner.
You know who else wanted to know more about Dr. Deidre Amaro? It's our friends over there in the state of Israel. But check out this date, June 30th, 2025. A sudden spike in the interests of the head medical examiner of the state of Utah, Dr. Deidre Amaro, emanating from, once again, the state of Israel, for reasons unknown. What about Timpanogos Regional Hospital, the hospital where Charlie Kirk was declared dead? Well, there's pretty much no interest in Timpanogos Regional Hospital in the state of Israel, because why would there be? Except this spike that happened about a month before Charlie Kirk's death. That is very odd. And it was a surgeon from this hospital that told us that Charlie Kirk was a quote-unquote man of steel, and that his body stopped a bullet that would typically just go through everything, and it was an absolute miracle.
So now you know where Andrew Colvett got his talking point from. He got it from this very special doctor who came in and said, Charlie Kirk is a man of steel and his neck is a miracle. The only way that somebody makes a statement like that is if they're trying to cover something up. Period. There is no other reason. You ask anybody, including Mr. Bosch, who will be joining us soon, who is a Marine and is probably very familiar with all different types of weaponry, and will say there is no way that the suggested artillery used against him would not have severed his head off. But keep believing the bullshit. Keep drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm not buying it, and neither should you.
We don't know yet which surgeon supposedly said that, but here are a few surgeons who work at Timpanogos Regional Hospital. We got Dr. Stephen Nealman, Dr. Robert Patterson, Dr. Lee Peterson, Dr. Lee Trotter, just to name a few. I wonder if anybody was searching for these folks.
Stephen Nealman, July 18th, 2025. This was that of our friends on the other side of the planet over there. Very curious about the surgeons in Utah, you'll find out. Robert Patterson, MD, July 23 and 24. I go to the next one, Lee Trotter, someone with an IP address originating in Israel, looking up Surgeon Lee Trotter, near about that same July 20 time period.
How can anybody in the state of Israel know exactly where to look up these very specific doctors in this very specific place that was ultimately going to be viewing the supposed autopsy report of Charlie Kirk? It's not a coincidence. It's not 1 in a million. It's not 1 in a billion. It's probably 1 in a trillion. Again, there are no coincidences here. It could not be more obvious. But that is one of the true benefits of living with modern technology. There's a lot of disadvantages, to be fair. However, this is one of those situations where having modern technology, it somewhat evens the playing field with the powers that be. As much as they want to sweep everything under the rug, They do not have the luxury of being able to get away with it the way that they once did. You cannot assassinate a president today like you did 62 years ago and get away with it. I mean, they didn't really get away with it, but at the time they were able to placate the public, not without the type of fervor. And again, we're only talking about a very impactful thought leader. We're not talking about the president of the United States, although that's a whole other can of worms, depending on how far down that rabbit hole you want to go with what happened in Pennsylvania. All I can say is that all these pieces continue to connect, that Israel is responsible for what happened. So we have to keep digging.
Are there other surgeons in the area? Yeah, as a matter of fact, there is. There's a guy named Lee Patterson. So I look up Lee Patterson. Somebody with an IP address originating in Israel in the week of July 20, that week on either side of July 20, was very interested in all the people who practice surgery at Timpanogos Regional Hospital in Orem, Utah.
So yeah, I don't know. We can either believe that there just happened to be a few people in the state of Israel in the month of July and August who were very interested in finding out more about a certain regional hospital in the state of Utah and who the state's head medical examiner was, and the different surgeons in the area. Or maybe there's just one too many coincidences to not investigate further. Oh, and by the way, I just checked what Google Trends looks like now. And yeah, looks like absolutely nothing to see here, guys.
Which means that they have officially removed the search. Somebody caught it. Thankfully, somebody was willing to spread it on social media. Thankfully, we got it in the nick of time. But as you can see, if you attempt to go search it now, you're not going to find it. This is the censorship, the whitewashing, if you will, that is going to happen. It is painfully obvious what they're doing. This is why the complete corporatocracy takeover of our country, which is technically fascism, the merger of the state and corporate power, this is what happens. So if you want the truth, it's not that you can't handle the truth, is that you're not allowed to know the truth, because the truth will set us all free. And maybe, just maybe, we're all going to be good enough to actually get the word out there and make it so. By the way, we have almost 600 people watching, but we've only had just under 300 of you hit that like button. Please make sure that you smash it if you could. Let's get to 700 while we're at it. I will say this. First, hats off to James, because he's doing amazing work, and I don't think we're done yet with covering his work, because that was only part 2. And I believe he said he's got a 4-part series. So there's probably another part that we'll likely cover on Monday night when Jen is here. So that'll be interesting to talk about. There's going to be other layers to this story as we go forward, but bear in mind, just like Jack Posobiec, just like anybody else, if you're not speaking the same language of Candace Owens, of Tucker Carlson, and yes, of Nick Fuentes, then you're just not really on the side of justice. And I'm very suspicious of Fuentes right now, because I don't think he's fully where he needs to be. But again, he's also a very smooth operator, and he's trying to capture Charlie's audience, because as far as I can tell, Turning Point USA is going to collapse. All these signs point to a hit job and a massive cover-up in the process. And I do feel bad for people that have embraced him, his ideology, and they feel that he was somebody that spoke to them. And I can respect that, even if I didn't support him and he didn't speak to me. There have been people that I've admired that spoke to me, and they're gone. Can I help you? Oh, Jen decided to make a brief appearance for some reason. Anyway, if you guys are on board with where I'm coming from, These conversations are necessary because at some point, we're all going to realize that we're all just pawns in this big game. Even though Charlie sat on a very high pedestal, in the end, he was just a pawn like everyone else. Didn't matter how many people he had behind him. Didn't matter how much money he had control over. In the end, this is an example of why we have to constantly be working side by side. If we don't, it's not going to end well. And I bring this up for a couple of reasons. And I do think that with some of the stories that are going on right now, I want people to keep in mind why this situation in particular with Fuentes is such a big deal. When you ban somebody, like Spotify just did, banned him from any type of conversation, you are not hurting him. You're making him stronger and bigger and proving that you can't handle the truth. The only reason they block him isn't because he isn't trying to start trouble. They love when people start trouble. They don't like it when somebody of his magnitude is out there talking about topics that actually affect everyday people, like the control that the Zion-Nazi state has over us. And so what we have here is a clear-cut example of what is going to happen if they continue to try to shut him up. It's not going to work. And here's why.
Did you guys see this Daily Wire debate that aired this evening? Oh my gosh, guys, they are losing the plot here. And by they, I mean the Jews. They're losing. They can't help it. They are in a death spiral. And that's not a dog whistle. I don't mean anything violent by that. I mean,
no, you just want other people to make it so that it's all about the Jews, when in reality, it's about the Zionists and the elites. You see, you play right into their hands by using this language. You're not solving anything. But Nick knows this. Nick's a very smart, shrewd son of a bitch. He 1,000% knows the score, but he also knows how to placate to an audience because it's good for business. The Zionists love this more than anybody else. They love Nick Fuentes. They may not say it publicly. In fact, they'll have you believe that they hate his guts. But secretly, they're very enamored with his language. Because again, he's not prefacing it in any other way other than the Jews. When you say the Jews, you are only hurting anti-Zionist Jews and helping Zion Nazis in the process. Now, I do believe that he wants to see Ben Shapiro fall and the entire collapse of the Daily Wire. And guess what? So do I. I could care less if they fall flat on their face and are nothing. But Fuentes, again, is proving that you're not going to solve this problem listening to him if you think the issue here is just a blanket repudiation of the Jewish people. That's not the answer, and it never will be.
they are in a pattern of behavior where everything they do makes it worse. And it seems like there's nothing they could do, like they're not capable of doing anything that can make things better. Their behavior is causing people to really not like them. And their response to this is to just increase those behaviors. So people don't like that they're completely intolerant of dissent or criticism. So what do? They freak out. Anyone criticizes them, they call them trash. They say you're a foreign agent, you're an anti-Semite. They get angry.
And on that point, he's correct. He is identifying, as I said, he is, much like Charlie Kirk was an exceptional grifter, so is Nick. In fact, Nick's better than Charlie was. because Nick's actually an exceptional orator. He is very well read, studies, he knows the stuff. But he's dangerous. Not for the reasons that anybody else is talking about. It's because we are living in a desperate country right now where people are pissed off and they want to hurt people. And that's understandable. But you give power to people that completely understand that circumstance and are not going to temper their message. And it's not like they don't know this. Nick 1000% knows it. But he also understands that by not eliminating the Zio state, it's great for his brand. If we got rid of Israel and it became Palestine again, I mean, you're talking about a significant portion of his audience that after that be like, oh, you're just a little Hitler or something. He's going to lose a lot of his base and he's not going to be able to continue doing what he's doing, which is also why he's tempered his message when it comes to Israel. We've covered it, but this is another example. Going after the Daily Wire, understandable. But in the context in which he's doing it, he's not hurting Ben Shapiro. He's helping him because then Shapiro gets to go and talk. You see what he did? You see what he said to me? He said it's all about the Jews. He's a terrible person. We really hate Nick Fuentes. We have to support our cause. Support the Daily Wire, blah, 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 blah. That's my Ben Shapiro. But we'll finish it out because, again, the importance is context. Context is everything when it comes to this issue.
And it's like this just keeps, it really is circling the drain because it's cyclical almost. People get angry and the Jews tell them you have to be suppressed. People get angrier. The Jews get even more suppressive, more censorious, if that's a word, more tyrannical. And it just keeps going and going.
And for your bottom line, that's a good thing. See, as much as you're willing to identify part of the problem, you're not identifying the actual problem, which is how do we get out of this situation? The only way we get out of it is if we are properly nuanced about where the real problem lies within the Jewish people. It is an elite problem. It has always been a class war. It always will be. And those that sit at the top hear you spouse that it's a full-on Jewish problem, that all Jews are bad. No one enjoys hearing that more than somebody like Ben Shapiro. You're only helping him, and you're only helping his kind. He doesn't give a fuck about anything other than how do I stay right where I am in spite of everything that's going on. That's why I said he is a foil. Fuentes is a foil specifically for the Zionist cause, even though he is saying the right thing about a number of these issues pertaining to the Zionist brigade. But he's doing it in a way that is creating just as much gasoline as he is creating a fire hose over the whole situation. You can't solve it by putting out one fire and starting another one. That's ostensibly what he's doing. And it is imperative for those that follow him, because again, like I said, so much of the fervor surrounding Fuentes is about the fact that this country is in a death spiral in so many respects. And they're angry and they're desperate and they're going to listen to somebody like him because he's saying stuff that the populist left is not saying. They're going to go somewhere and they're going to him. He was the #1 voice on Spotify just recently. And apparently it wasn't even his doing. He came out and said, no, somebody else put it up for me. And I became the #1 voice. And then what did Spotify do? They took him down. You think that that helps get rid of Nick Fuentes? No, it just helps him substantially. He continues to be portrayed as a martyr amongst the politicos, even those that don't necessarily agree with him. They see him in that martyr conception of, oh, well, the establishment wants to get rid of him, so he must be a good guy. He's just misunderstood. That's all it is. No. They're going to do anything and everything to prevent the inevitable shift of American populism, no matter where on the spectrum you fall. It is imperative upon us to distinguish the difference between the two, because if we do not, we are going to continue to descend into a proverbial hell that I am not 100% certain we are going to be able to get ourselves out of. That's the fear. And I do worry. But I'm also optimistic, because if we continue to speak out, we're shadow banned. Almost everything that you see in terms of this channel is all grassroots. We seldom, if ever, hit the algorithm. And when we do, we take off like a rocket ship. One of our clips the other day hit the algorithm and it's over 125,000 views now. And then you look at our regular clips that go on a regular basis and we get, 3, 5, 7,000 views, which is still good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But again, it's all grassroots based. You are never going to see us invited to be on some type of growth spurt. It's not going to happen. Every person who's here, I mean, I'm sure we have some hate watchers at this point, but all that being said, most of the people that are here because they're curious, because they're seeking the truth. And it is our job to try to provide it. So let's do it. Clyde, if you're there, brother, let me know. I see you're in the studio, and if you're ready to rock and roll. So when it comes to these relationships that we're trying to build, as I said, I now know that Clyde Bosch has a substantial platform on Instagram, but I didn't know who he was. And the reason I now know who he is because of our mutual friend, Anthony Aguilar. And when you form these relationships that can bring these very important conversations together so that we continue to build this populist movement to, let's be honest, save our country. That's what we're trying to do here. When somebody asks me, why do I fight for a revolution? It isn't because I hate America. It's because I love America and I want to save it. That's why. And if anybody can speak to that in this moment, it's Clyde Bosch. Welcome to Revolutionary Change.
How's it going, brother? Thank you for having me on. How's the audio, by the way?
Sounds great. It's great to have you here, man. And thank you for all that you do, first and foremost.
Of course, yeah. Thank you for having me on. So I saw that you guys had Anthony on. He's a good friend of mine. We've been in touch for a couple months now. So one of the first times when he came and did a direct action protest here in DC, because I live in DC, we connected through our mutual friend, Josephine Gilbo, and they came together and they did a direct action protest. I think it was Ted Cruz. It was some hearing at the Capitol, and they stood up and interrupted the hearing, and they both got arrested. And then later that night, when they were released from jail, that's when I met Anthony for the first time. And I've only seen him on his interviews because he doesn't really have social media. He's off the grid for the most part. And I've been trying to get in touch with this guy for a while. And then my friend Josie, she met him and knew him and introduced us. But he's everything that you see online and more. He's a genuine person. He's a genuine patriot. He loves his country. He served in the military for 25 years. He's a genuine dude. What he says is truth, and he backs it up with receipts. I mean, the stuff that he's been talking about in Gaza was stuff that he showed me on his phone. And he's told me stuff that he hasn't even talked about on podcasts before, and it's absolutely disgusting. The thing about that guy is he was totally out of the game. He wasn't into politics. He was in the military for 25 years, and when you're in the military, you're apolitical. You don't talk about politics. You can vote. You can exercise your rights to vote, but you don't talk about politics. And so he was pretty much removed from the scene of what was going on in Gaza. And he even told me, he wasn't really involved. He wasn't really paying too much attention, but he told me that he was more pro-Israel before he went to Gaza and actually saw what was going on. And then he was radicalized when he saw the evils, when he saw the American contractors hunting Palestinians for sport, when he saw the IDF hunting Palestinians for sport. and counting their kills like it was a game. So he came out, and he's been one of the biggest voices, especially for the veteran community, because as a veteran myself, I've tried to be a voice for that community, a community of people that's historically been far right or historically been MAGA. I was MAGA at one point, the military falls into those tropes and they fall under that wing of politics. And they kind of just get sucked into some of the propaganda there. And they get sucked into the anti-Islam, anti-Arab, anti-Middle East, pro-Israel tropes and crowd. And so as a veteran, I try to come out and speak against that from somebody who is a veteran. So it's nice to have somebody like Anthony on our side.
Clyde, why did you join the Marines, and what was it about MAGA that first appealed to you and ultimately became your political identity?
Yeah, so I joined the Marine Corps. It was something that I always wanted to do as a kid growing up. I looked up to people like Anthony. I looked up to the Special Forces community. I looked up to people like Navy SEALs and Green Berets and Rangers and all those guys. I was a kid playing GI Joes with airsoft guns in my backyard all summer long. And I view myself as a patriot, somebody who loves his country, and I thought that by joining the military, that was the best thing that I could do for my country. The biggest sacrifice that I can make for America and the American people was to join the military. And so I did it out of like this patriotic mindset to go in. I never saw combat or anything like that. But I did my time, and I realized I didn't want to serve anymore. I wanted to get out and do other things with my life. While I was in, I was pretty much MAGA through and through. I had voted for Trump once or twice. I think the first two times he ran. I did not vote, period, the last election. And I started waking up to Trump, really waking up to Trump leading up to the election. And just kind of paying attention more to his allegiance to Israel. And my thing was, I'm not going to side with a politician that sides with Israel, because I view them as our greatest adversary. I view Israel as America's greatest threat. And if I see any politician, left or right, Republican or Democrat, that sides with Israel, I see that as borderline treason. I see them as a traitor, and I'm not going to support them. So that was the first thing that woke me up to Trump. And I mean, it's just escalated since he's been in office this time. I mean, he's literally bragging about being the best friend Israel has ever had in the White House.
Well, listen, they're a really great country, and they've given me a lot of money, so I have to placate them just a little bit. You understand, that's business. That's how it goes. I try to make light of it because what else can you do? It is, I think, the last bastion of our current political system. I think that Trump was, I mean, him and Bernie were both kind of that last bastion of hope for populism in the United States. We saw the lengths that this oligarchic class that's almost universally Zionist on top of everything else, that they were willing to do in order to put us down. I almost joined the service after 9/11. I remember this girl that I dated who I liked a lot, she ended up going in. She met her husband there. He died. He was killed on his third tour. And even today, knowing all that we know, when he went to Iraq, and it's like, your government lies to you. Even the great United States of America will lie to you, because this isn't about freedom and democracy. It's about resources. It's about money and power. This tale as old as time. And now you really can't hide it anymore, because I paid close attention to Trump as I did Bernie that whole summer of 2015, which was just such a political odyssey for so many people. You finally had these guys that were running for office that were talking about the real everyday problems that probably hadn't been discussed to that degree since Kennedy was in the White House. And I think so much of the way that things had evolved in a negative fashion, people really put their hopes into Trump, which is why millions switched over from Bernie after what they did to him in the primary, and ultimately as an FU to the Democratic establishment. They said, well, you know what, we're going to take a chance on Trump. Maybe he'll do something. And initially, I think, especially the first thing he did when he got in, which was axe the Trans-Pacific Partnership, I said, okay, you know what, got to give this guy his due. Maybe he's really going to try to help this country. And then little by little by little, we saw all of these manifestations of things that would ultimately happen. But everything that's transpired over the last 2 years, I think has completely crystallized just how detrimental this relationship with Israel really is. I think we're uncovering things that we were never aware of. I mean, it was probably right underneath our noses. We just didn't smell it. But now we can. It's like, oh, yeah, that's right. That's exactly why that happened. That's why that happened. And now we are all kind of, in many ways, I think, these little detectives asking questions that normally we wouldn't ask. We're a very curious batch of politicos that are out there right now that are trying to figure out, what the problem is. I think we've identified it. Now, how do we solve it? What's the future look like as far as how we bring these populist factions together to save our country?
Yeah, I mean, people have asked me plenty of times, how do we change? What do we do? I get DMs all the time from followers asking, I want to get involved. I want to do more. How can we stop this? How can we take our country back? And there's only so much that we can do when we're divided. I mean, there's nothing we can do when we're divided. And there's only so much that we can do when we are united. And that's another one of my angles. The content that I try to promote and post is to unify the country. And if you remember, it's not that long ago, what happened with Charlie Kirk, that was 9/10. 9/11 is supposed to be the one day out of the year that the country comes together and is united together, regardless of political differences. This 9/11, nobody was talking about 9/11. Everybody was at each other's throats. Everybody was hating their neighbor. And that's what I try to avoid, is this political separation. Hating your neighbor on your left, hating the guy next door because he voted this way, or because he's a Democrat, or because he's a Republican. And that's really what they want. They want the political divide between the commonwealth, between the common folk, between the peasants in their eyes. They want us at each other's throats. And that way, we don't see what they're doing at the top, and we're not focused on them. So if we don't come together as a nation and realize that it is the oligarchs, it is the global elites, it is the Zionists, it is the corrupt politicians and the corporations that are pitting us against each other, and get over our small differences, nothing's going to change. There's going to be no revolution. There's going to be no change at all. And so, we can talk about revolution. People ask me, oh, we need a revolution. How do we start a revolution? Well, I don't think there's going to be an armed revolution. This isn't 1776. I don't think America's cut out for that anymore. And I don't think that's necessarily what we need anyways. But if we can come together as Americans and come together on the same page to be against the global elites, to be against the Zionists, that's where we can actually make change. If we can boycott these corporations, if we can go on strikes, if we could get millions of Americans to say, you know what, you're not taking my tax dollars and doing good things with it. You're funding a genocide. If millions of Americans just said, I'm not going to pay taxes this season, we could bring the system down to their knees.
Well, that's libertarianism at its finest. I used to be very confused about the ideology because socially I am extremely libertarian. If you're not bothering anybody, it's your own personal preference, do whatever you want. We all know that so much of the culture war that's transpired over the last 7 to 10 years is predominantly all about controlling capital. It has nothing to do with whether people have individual liberty or if people are being targeted specifically because of their sexuality, gender, whatever. All of that stuff to me is one big distraction from the realities of what we deal with on a regular basis. But when I would hear different people within the libertarian circles, I've had Angela McArdle on the channel. I've had Ron Paul's main guy, Daniel McAdams, on. The whole concept about not paying taxes isn't about we don't care about we the people. Libertarians recognized a long time ago that the government is corrupt. It is not your friend. If you fall under the liberal political ideology that the government can actually help you or that's what it's there to do, you've already lost, which is why I try to emphasize so much to the progressive wings of politics, is that there is nothing wrong with the government if the government is working for you. Mm-hmm. Thomas Jefferson had one of the greatest sayings in the history of our country. When people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. If you look at any country in the world, France probably being the most obvious example, the French government fears the shit out of their people because they know they'll put the yellow vests on, they'll get in the streets, and they'll demand shit. That's why France has the best healthcare in the world. They're always rated number one. And it's like, yeah, because the government actually fears their people because they know that their people demand a decent life and they're willing to give it to them. Whereas here in the United States, it's like we just accept the little crumbs that we're given and accept, well, that's all we're entitled to. No, we're entitled to a hell of a lot more. in terms of, the basis of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think that's been lost by a lot of people. And I think these divisions that we see every day it's all designed at the top. All of it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a distraction, man. They push these culture wars, these race wars, these religious wars, getting Muslims and Christians against each other, getting the left and right against each other, getting the gays and the straights or whatever else, whatever demographic of people you want to use. They'll pin us against each other and get us to stop focusing on the real issues.
In terms of the elected officials on Capitol Hill, now I'm going to give you a little crash course into how I came into this whole situation, and my partner, Jen Perlman. She is the lady who ran against one of the absolute worst federally elected representatives in this country, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. We ran a couple of congressional races against her. The first one probably could have done even better than it ultimately ended up doing, considering how we were complete novices in the political game. However, we were able to get almost 30% of the vote on the first go-around. And then this last election cycle, Jen made a very conscious decision from the beginning that she was going to unabashedly run as a pro-Palestine Jew in South Florida. Now, of course, there was no way she was going to win that election, but it was a necessary conversation to uplift the voices that feel voiceless and show that we, the people, is much stronger than the ideological differences that people want us to, the powers that be, want us to be separated by. Wasserman Schultz is a particularly loathsome human being because she is always ready, willing, and able to fly over to her favorite country, take pictures with Milikowski. Remember, that's Netanyahu's real name. Yeah. And to me, that's a traitor to the United States. A person who has taken over $1 million from the Israel lobby, a person who always votes in their favor. And on top of everything else, she's one of the most aggressive insider traders in this country. So if we have a federal legislature that is trading on inside information, and it isn't just any inside information, it's primarily war profiteering insider information that they're profiting on. I don't understand how we do not go the libertarian route and just say, oh, I'm not paying my taxes anymore. Why should I? I don't have a say in where my money goes. I don't understand how that's not a bigger movement. Maybe it's becoming one, and we're just not aware of it, but these conversations are helping to facilitate. And if in any way this is helping, then heck, I'm here for it, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I probably should push for more and bring more light to is, think about it. If millions of Americans got on the same page and they just said, I don't care if I'm left or right, I don't care who you voted for, who I voted for, we all don't like what the government is doing with our money. This is our hard-earned money. You know, if you're an entrepreneur, you get taxed heavily. If you're self-employed, you get taxed heavily. We can't afford houses out here. You know, my generation, we can't, my peers or my people in my generation get out of college and they go hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt. And they hope they're going to get a good paying job and then go live the American dream and go buy a house and have a family and have kids. Why is the birth rate so low? Because nobody wants to have kids. My generation doesn't want to have kids right now. We can't afford it. We can't even afford to buy a house. You know, my grandparents could. They could get married at 20, 21, buy a house and have kids and just be fine. We can't do that today. So if we don't like how our money's being spent, it's not doing us any benefit, and everything is so expensive, then why don't we come together and say, you know what? We're not going to pay taxes. We're just not going to pay taxes. We don't like that you're funding a genocide with our money, and then we're not getting any of the money back ourselves.
What are some of the populist policies that you would support? You know, I've often said that friend of the show, Clint Russell, who has contemplated also running against another one of the worst scumbags in all of politics, Randy Fine. You know, he has always been a fierce advocate for ending the Fed. And to his surprise, Jen and I both want to end the Fed, but we also want a single payer healthcare system. And I asked him, would you be willing to compromise on single payer if we rally the populist left on ending the Fed? And he said, absolutely. And I don't see why more of these right and left populist conversations don't happen, because the presumption is always, and I see this on all these channels, I'm sure you see it too, and the left, in my opinion, is just as bad as the right, where it's always this divide and conquer strategy. Well, this person doesn't like gay people, or this person, again, live and let live, respect everyone's opinions and beliefs. But at the end of the day, if we're going to live in a society, there are elements to that society that we will only thrive if we have these basic needs met. Healthcare happens to be one of them. Education is another. The quality of our air and water is another. And whether or not we continue to be the world's hegemony regarding endless war is another as well. And I'm thinking there probably isn't that big of a difference in many respects as far as where people see these particular problems. I'd like to think there's a lot of crossover. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's enough money being paid into the system where we can have free healthcare, we can have free education, just like other countries. It's the fact that we put so much money into the military-industrial complex. We put more money into the military, more money into the military-industrial complex by far than any other country. And we rally around that concept of patriotism in our troops. And I'm glad that I can be in the military and be, thanked for my service, and people are grateful for that. Sure. But there's too much emphasis on that. They're using veterans kind of as this way to promote warmongering and to promote shoveling more and more and more money into the military industrial complex. And I was just talking to Anthony about this a couple weeks ago. Our military should be and is designed to be a defensive force, not an offensive force. But we have historically been used as an offensive force, or more so a defensive force for Israel. They go and attack somebody, and then we defend them. And we send our money, our tax-paying dollars, and our troops to go over there and fight those wars. We're putting far too much money into our military-industrial complex, going over and destabilizing countries in the Middle East and all over the world, helping Israel. And we're not keeping that money here at home to help the people that actually need it. The homeless, the mental health crisis in America, free Medicare, free healthcare, free education. So my thing is we need to stop this warmongering, stop pushing so much money into the military industrial complex and keep it here at home. So I don't know what policy, what was the term you used?
But, well, I look at it as economic populism is always the order of the day, because in the end, one thing I learned, especially in the labor movement, is that you have just as many Trump supporters as you do Bernie supporters. You seldom have corporate centrist friendly type people that are in that world. I'm always hypercritical of, the typical, Kamala Harris, Biden type of voter, the gleeful ones, if you will, because what I've learned is that as this country continues to become more and more technologically dependent, we are faced with a situation that when things really start to get bad, especially with AI's takeover of our country, and they decide what you can and can't say, the people who are capable of living off the grid, like you are, and I think I could be, I mean, there are certain things that I understand about basic survival skills, but it's probably a lot of things I need to brush up on that I should. I think we're living in a situation where the people who should be having the most to say about our future are ones who actually are going to know what to do when ish really hits the fan in a very bad way. I've always felt that AI in particular is almost like a tool of the devil in so many respects, because again, it's creating a world where they want you to be inferior. They want you to be helpless, and that you can't actually survive. When it comes to something like creatures of comfort and people in particular who want to live comfortable lives, I have a very simple attitude about that. And this is something that individuals like yourself, I know, always appreciate. Comfort is not your right. It is a privilege to live comfortably. If you think you're entitled to anything in this world, you're in for a very rude awakening, because things are changing very rapidly, very quickly, because the people that have been willing to put up with your ish for so long are now starting to see it for what it is, and they don't like it. And eventually the dam is going to break. So I do think it is imperative that if we're going to create a more populist world that we're hoping to have to kind of rewrite the history of this country, that to me, in so many ways, starts with recognizing what the actual issue is here. If people are not recognizing the downside of technology, it's a great asset, it's a great detriment. Without it, you and I don't know each other. But also, it is creating this culture of dependency where we want people to step up and fight back, but they don't really know how to do it because they're stuck in their creatures of comfort, wanting to fight in spite of that. This isn't 1776, but it's going to end up that way if we don't fight back and fight back quick, as far as I can see.
Yeah, I think there is a radical movement, and I joined kind of late. I didn't see the whole hour previously to when I came in here, but when people are driven to far left or far right, that can be problematic. And you were just talking about Nick Fuentes of like he's seen as the savior to so many people now because they don't know where else to turn. So they're turning to this one guy who's saying things that nobody else is saying. And a lot of people that I know have differing opinions on Nick Fuentes. Some people absolutely despise him, some people absolutely love him, and some people are in between. I'm a little bit in between. There's nobody out there in the political sphere that's I just agree with them wholeheartedly on everything. I've got my own brain and my own way of thinking. But there are certainly things I like about Nick Fuentes, and there are certainly things I don't like about him. But I think it's dangerous when people feel so hopeless and so lost that they see this guy as like a messiah or a savior. And I think that's what happened with Trump, and that's how he got elected again. You could see him telegraphing his radical policies. You could see him telegraphing his heavy support for Israel before he even got in office. But people were so fed up with what they had before with Biden or whatever else, the culture wars or whatever else, that they just all voted for Trump. And that was a lot of my generation. So these people who are driven to these extremes will go and find the most extreme person. And I think that is a little bit dangerous when you just wholeheartedly believe and trust somebody as if they're like this messiah figure. That's what happened with Trump, and I think that's what's happening with possibly Nick Fuentes as well.
And I think that's also a reflection of just people's level of desperation. People understand, again, Fuentes he's really good. Like again, respect where you give credit where credit is due. It doesn't mean that I like him. It doesn't mean that I don't have strong disagreements with him, but I can see a political force when I see one. Like I know he's capable. And that is in many ways also very dangerous because I don't think a substantial portion of his ideology is even pure. I think he understands exactly what he needs to do, what he needs to say in order to garner that support. Now, where I think he is different than a lot of the other ones out there that have these large platforms, particularly on the right, whether it is, Posobiec or Shapiro, I could go on and on. You know who they all are. He is differentiating in the sense that he is full on against the state of Israel to an extent. He's now pierced his language very carefully in many ways after what happened with Charlie. There could be many reasons for that. Again, you get to a certain level, you don't know left and right. You don't know who's on your side, who's working against you. But what I do know for certain is that this is a desperate country. People cannot afford to live. And there is a reason why somebody like Zohran Mamdani is going to be the next mayor of New York City. And you don't have to like him. And there are things regarding his ideology that I do not agree with. But I also know that if you've ever attempted to live in a wealthy part of the United States, in this case, New York City, and I believe in your case, you're close to DC, it is very expensive to just live basic. And if we're not going to talk about private equity and how monopolization has completely taken over our country, I think of the Democratic establishment and how they're now pushing Newsom as the next Clinton. And I'm thinking, you look back at Clinton's presidency, and he had 5 of the worst domestic policies this country's ever seen. He had NAFTA, normal trade relations with China, the crime bill, the Telecom Act, and the worst one of all, the removal of Glass-Steagall and the merging of the banking system. And by doing that, you gave way to so many of these problems. And to deny that reality is why the two-party system is a complete failure. I don't blame you for saying, "Yep, I'm not voting." What the hell's the point? You're going to get, you're going to get two sides of the same coin. Maybe on a couple of, wedge issues, whether it's LGBTQ, abortion, etc. Yes, there will be a difference, but in terms of the actual economic infrastructure of this country, you will get the same thing no matter who you vote for in that system.
Yeah, totally agree. And so what are your thoughts on Mamdani, somebody like that?
So I initially was really in favor of what he was fighting for because I know I'm from New Jersey, so I'm very well aware of particularly of all the things in New York City. There is a limit to what you could do in terms of rent control. I'm in commercial real estate. I understand completely that this is really about where the market actually is. But having a market balance in terms of what people are capable of paying versus what you force them to pay is, again, that's an issue that never gets properly dealt with. And that's why somebody like Mamdani, who says rent control is the solution, again, it isn't. However, to suggest that we cannot regulate it is BS. And that's why he's there. We 1000% have a runaway corrupt system, particularly when it comes to the grocery chains. This Greek billionaire that owns a slew of chains within New York City is a criminal as far as I'm concerned. And so because of the fact that he gets away with what he gets away with, and now he thinks, oh, I'm just going to tell everybody that you're going to get communism as a result. No, if you end up having one specific grocery store that is government funded or government controlled within each of the 5 boroughs, you're going to balance out the competition. Because there is no competition. It's complete runaway. It's not even capitalism. It's total oligarchy.
Socialism. Yeah. So yeah.
Of the worst kind. And so if you can balance out the cost problems that so many people are dealing with, carton of eggs, milk, etc., then you're going to get somewhere if you can at least get that one, if that one policy passed. As far as transportation is concerned, yes, I think it's completely out of sight, out of mind, but it's not just whether it's the bus fares, the mass transit fares within the subway system. There are so many basic economic problems that have not been properly regulated. To me, the only way capitalism works is with socialism. You have to balance the two together. You have to make sure that the free market can thrive, but at the same time, if you do not regulate the free market when it's necessary, you're going to completely destroy the country, and that is essentially what's happened. So I think a balance is necessary, which is why I'm not surprised at all that Mamdani won. However, the way he's changing his language, particularly about Zionists as of late, it already shows me exactly what's going on here. It doesn't mean I don't want to give him the benefit of the doubt, and let's see what he does, because he's going to win, and we'll see what ends up happening. But if you even attempt to shift your language, knowing full well that you only won that mayoral race primarily because you stood up to Israel,
Because of that one clip, yeah.
then what the hell's the point, man? What are you doing?
I haven't seen what has he been saying lately. I haven't seen too much of how he's shifted his.
So they're all coming after him left and right because they know he's going to win. And one of Barry Weiss's underlings, her name is Olivia Feingold. So she goes out and she writes this piece, basically confirming that she, had, I guess, gotten a statement from Mamdani saying, yes, I will have Zionists within my administration. Why would you feel the need to say that? You are under no obligation. In fact, you probably have a mandate. So why would you feel the need to make that statement? I don't understand that. That to me,
his running mate was a Jewish man, correct?
Well, one of the people that ran for mayor was Brad Lander, who's the city comptroller. He's Jewish and he is in favor of Palestine. And so he ended up supporting him as a result. He was out there campaigning with him. Look, he ran a fantastic campaign. And at the end of the day, he is infinitely better than anything Cuomo is going to do for New York, because Cuomo was a terrible governor and he's a Zion Nazi on top of that. So you're going to put those types of individuals in positions of power. That to me is just reflective of, okay, you may not like a lot of what Mamdani's saying from a socialist standpoint, but let me tell you, man, you just be grateful that he's preaching socialism and not communism, because that's what's coming next if we don't deal with this broken system. I don't want communism, and I'm sure you don't either. Yeah. So the only way we deal with this is we figure out a way to balance the free market with a social safety net. That's the only way.
That's actually a great point, because I honestly haven't thought about it that way. When capitalism does get a little bit out of control, it does turn into an oligarchy.
Yeah.
And we've seen that time and time again. We're seeing it right now more than ever. And just the point that we made with, Nick Fuentes and Trump, how Trump won this election and how Nick Fuentes is getting so much traction. When people are so sick with one narrative, they're going to go as far to the next extreme as possible. So, yeah, I think I haven't thought about it that way, but that is a very good point to say that communism could be coming next if people get really, really fed up with this. I don't even know if we should call it capitalism, but oligarchy,
And I want to be very clear to Korn and to anybody else in our chat who is on the left who supports communism. I don't care if you support communism. That is your right. And you know what? In the free market of ideas, if you think that communal ownership of property is the way that the entire country should be run, that's fine. And you can preach that. You are never going to have me on board with that. Because the one thing, and I say this to you, Clyde, as I would say to anybody who has certain tendencies to lean one direction or another in terms of political ideology, you obviously would probably, I would imagine, would say you lean more to the right than you do to the left. However, one thing that I think can be crystal clear, that I say this to people on the right as I say on the left, the problem with people on the right is they do not account for human greed as often as they should.
No, absolutely not.
And the people on the left do not account for the human spirit as much as they should. The spirit is what drives people to succeed, to create, and be successful. You take that away under the type of, again, there is a difference between communism and authoritarianism, but remember, the basis of communism is this idea that individualism isn't really necessary. And I don't buy into that. I do believe that we are all destined to do different things on this earth, which is why I do believe in a hybrid system. I do believe in a system where you can have a free market with a legitimate social safety net where basic human needs are met for everybody. It's go to Australia, go to Japan, go to Germany, go to France. There's plenty of places around the world you can go to, and you can see that people are living very reasonably decent lives, much better than they're living here. And so while we can't agree on everything, I think we can agree enough that whatever this system is that we're stuck in right now, it's a death spiral and we got to get out of it.
Yeah, at its core, at the, in theory, capitalism sounds perfect. It sounds great for somebody like me. I'm an entrepreneur. I have that entrepreneurial spirit. I've never, when I got out of the military, I didn't get a job. I went full on into entrepreneurship, and I thought, I just want to be an entrepreneur and build my own life and build my own empire. And I want to be a self-made millionaire and all these things. And just, I want to grind it out and be successful. And so with that concept in mind of like, make it or break it, it's up to me. I love that. I love that American dream idea that you can, build yourself up and be successful with this capitalistic society. But yes, if you do not have regulations on it, the people at the top, the very top 1%, is going to turn into an oligarchy. Trump's always been in the 1%, and he's just feeding his 1% friends more. He's just taking more from his 1% friends. So yeah, I think there does need to be an even balance between the two. And I'm not saying we need to go full-blown socialism. I'm not saying we need to do that. So definitely not communism. And I don't like the idea of people being dependent on the government, for sure. I want people to be pursuing their own success in life. I want people to not be lazy and to go out and make a good life for themselves. But I do think there needs to be an even balance. And I'm not sure exactly what that would look like or how that would be implemented.
I would definitely say that of all the policies that I think we can get to the middle on and get everybody on board is with single-payer healthcare. What that basically is you are removing the for-profit middlemen in between us and our doctors. I believe that if you are a great doctor and you're living in Southern Maryland, for example, and you're capable of making $1 million a year because you're just that good at what you do, I have no issue with that. What I do have a problem with is Cigna, Aetna, United, Blue Cross. They don't have any reason to exist. Zero. They are just for-profit middlemen that purposely figure out a way to create austerity measures for people to live. Crazy. And then when it comes to big pharma, you want to talk about one of the greatest crimes. I mean, the one thing we can all agree on, I am not a big partaker in this, but I 1000% support it. And if cannabis is what prevents, especially a lot of veterans, from going down the path of opioids or even suicidal tendencies because of things they did or didn't do when they served in the armed forces in combat, they need all of the help that they can get. And we live in a country where right now, not only do we not have that, but we're trying to start World War III in Venezuela, claiming that it's because of the drug trade, which is bullshit. So I believe that if we had a single payer system and the basic needs were met, we're essentially, again, it saves $500 billion a year anyway. They're going to say, oh, you're going to raise taxes. No, what you're going to do is you're going to find you have a lot more money in your pocket as a result of not having to pay these premiums, these co-pays, all of these additional little caveats that they throw in at you every time something goes wrong. You should not have to pay a dime if you go to get a basic checkup at a doctor's office.
Yeah.
If there is anything that we should all be able to agree upon, it's this. When they say government funded, that is the difference between government run. I don't want the government running healthcare. I want the government to stay the hell out of it and just do what we the people want, which is you are going to print money, we are going to get taxed, and we want that tax money to go directly to our health. We don't need it to go to your for-profit system. Doesn't need to go to that, even though it does, even though they claim it doesn't. This is an example, a prime example of language is everything. Not everybody on the political right is going to agree that healthcare is a human right. But I think what they would agree on is if we're going to be spending money on healthcare, we might as well do it in the most efficient way possible, the most cost-effective way possible. And the way that you do that is with single payer, period. It is so clear as day simple. And I remember when Trump was first running and he said, I went over to Ireland and this friend of mine, he got hurt on the golf course. And the next thing you know, he goes to the doctor and it only cost him $10. Wasn't that amazing? I'm like, yeah, it is amazing. Why don't you push for it here in the States? He went in there and immediately said, why don't we just give everybody Medicare? That's not how it works here in this country, sir. Well, it should work that way in this country. And it's on us to figure out how we continue to collaborate. Is there an issue that you see on the populist right that you wish that perhaps the populist left should embrace, but they don't currently?
An issue on the populist right that the populist left does not agree with?
Sure.
Off the top of my head, not that I can think of, but I did want to touch on what you were just saying. I mean, for me personally, because I want to give a personal story, because I'm very much against Big Pharma. I think Big Pharma is the biggest drug cartel in the world. And I'm very big on holistic medicine and living a holistic lifestyle. I think America is the most obese country in the world.
By
And I've
far.
traveled to, it is disgusting to see just how many obese people we have in this country. And I've been to 27 different countries in my lifetime. And you go to places like Japan, you don't see obese people. You go to places like Europe, you don't see obese people. And they have better health care, but they also just live a better, healthier lifestyle. They get out and walk more. They have better food. There's not so much junk and crap and preservatives and chemicals pumped into their food, right? And so I'm very big on this holistic lifestyle. Also, when I got out of the military, I did have PTSD. I wasn't in combat, but I was in a helicopter crash, and I absolutely hate flying. And I fly every single month. Every time I get on a plane, I think I'm going to die. And I talked to some friends about maybe getting some help with that and maybe going to the VA, but the VA would just want to put me on Prozac or Xanax. And I don't want to pump myself with all these chemicals and these pills to treat or to mask my symptoms instead of actually treat the root cause of it. So you go to the doctor and they just want to give you a shot or a pill, right? And this is just feeding back into big pharma and the corporations that profit off of people's sickness. People are obese and they got to go to the doctor and get Ozempic or whatever the case is. And they're just pushing these medications that don't actually treat and cure the symptom, but they mask it. And it is quite disgusting. So for anybody watching, I would always push a more holistic lifestyle, holistic medicine. I don't talk about it too much, but I am very big in it. I've read a few books on it, and I do talk about it sometimes.
Good for you. And I absolutely agree. I think that living a healthy lifestyle is half the battle. And I would also say to a lot of people, if you do not currently exercise on the regular, if you don't cook your own meals, I can't emphasize enough how much of a difference that does make, and would recommend that you do that. It makes such a difference, especially when you cut out sugar and bad carbs. It really goes a long way to just completely cleansing the body, cleansing the mind. I mentioned that I almost joined the military, but I got my military training from my grandfather, my late grandfather, who served in World War II. And during the last 10 years of his life, we became very close. And I basically became a man because of him. No disrespect to my parents, but he's the person who really showed me certain basic adulting concepts that I otherwise was not really privy to in a way that I became as a result of following his guidance. And I will always be grateful for that. And I do think that these are just basic life lessons that a lot of people can take, and it makes a huge difference, and especially when it comes to medication. And I do see that as an epidemic amongst millennials and Gen Z, of which you and I are a part of. And as a result, the constant desire to, oh, I want to take that pill or that pill. If you're on pills, unless it is 1000% necessary, there are always ways to figure out how to medically help yourself without having to pop pills. So holistic living, I would always recommend. And again, there's always exceptions. But in the end, we can become such a healthier nation if we figured out that whatever the government, everyone thinks I'm like anti-government. I'm not anti-government to that extent, but I will say that whatever they're telling you that you should be doing, chances are do the exact opposite of whatever.
Yeah, quite literally, yeah.
So
with that topic in mind, what are your thoughts on RFK?
So my thoughts on RFK is that I think he had some really good ideas, and some of his ideas were not so good. And one thing I will tell you is that when I was at his launch, I went to his launch in Philadelphia, and it was a great speech, despite some of the people that he surrounded himself with at that event. But I always felt that there were two things that he was running for president on that made a lot of sense. The first one is that our food is poison, correct. Yep. And number two, private equity has completely taken over our economic system. Unfortunately, number three is that RFK is a Zionist. Now, is he a Zionist because I think it's his preference and choice? I'm not 100% certain. And the reason being is because I got a press pass to the event. So I was in the pit. I was with Evangeline Lilly, a whole bunch of other people. But one of the people I was there with was a lady by the name of Emily Austin. Now, at the time, I didn't know who she was. And, she was a decent looking girl. And, we talked for like 15, 20 minutes. We ended up exchanging numbers and thought I would get in touch with her. But little did I know who she really was. And after a while, it finally dawned on me who Emily Austin really is. She's RFK's AIPAC handler. That's the only explanation. There's no way that some young 20-year-old, unless he's banging her, which he could have been, I don't know, not for me to decide to judge. Point being is that the only reason why somebody like her who pops up out of nowhere is basically following his campaign around everywhere it goes is if there's some type of a business agreement. And to me, that's the only thing that makes sense, because he had an opportunity in a lot of ways to make a difference. And he chose to fall on the Israel sword. And the only thing that tells me is that he's got a lot of demons in his closet that he doesn't want coming out. And Emily Austin played her part to make sure that he walked the line and do what was necessary. But I see right through you, Emily.
I think it's a mixture for RFK especially. I think it is a mixture of blackmail. And, we know a bit of RFK's past. He didn't have the most, he had a colorful past. We'll just call it that.
Sure.
So what else is in his past that they might have dug up to hold against him? Because sometimes the way he talks about it when he's asked, it seems like he has a gun to his head when he's talking about Israel or anything that is pro-Zionist. That's one part of it. I think possibly RFK has some blackmail held against him, but also I don't think that anybody can get in there in politics. I don't think anybody can do anything here in DC unless they bend to their will a little bit. And Bernie Sanders talked about this on the Joe Rogan podcast, because Joe Rogan asked him, why is everybody so pro-Israel, so willing to take money from AIPAC? And he said, because if you don't, it's political suicide. At a certain point, you got to just bend to their will a little bit if you want to do anything else that you want to do. So if RFK wants to, he's really passionate about cleaning up our food supply and getting these toxins out of our food, that's something he's really passionate about. He feels that that's very important to do. He might think to himself, well, this is so important that I have to do this. It is an objectively good thing, positive thing for America. But in order to do it, I got to please them just enough. I got to give them just enough to stay in power so that I can do these other good things. And I think there's a lot of politicians that possibly feel that way. I don't think everybody is just on their knees for Israel, loves Israel, and is super happy and supportive of everything that they're doing. I think a bit of that is that they realize they have to bend to their will a little bit if they want to be effective in other areas.
I would say that that's fair, but I also think that there is a line that gets crossed, and it's just not acceptable. If you are not,
of course, I'm not excusing it. I'm just
Yeah,
saying I think that's there.
no, and I definitely agree. I think that we have gotten to a point now where we all have to be collectively awake about the control that the Zionist state has over our country. And as Jen likes to say, we are one and the same. Israel is us. We are Israel, at least at the top anyway. I don't think the average American cares for Israel, but now they really don't care for it in a very big way. And that's where I think it's a good place to wind down the conversation, where I think that this is very important, because I noticed that you obviously had a conversation with Bilzerian the other day. Look, he's got an unbelievable reach, which is, to his credit, very big. I also think that he uses language, much like Jake Shields does and a handful of others, that are following the Fuentes school of thought, which is this is a Jew problem, and if we just dealt with the Jews, that we would solve this problem. No, it is an elite Jewish problem. And that is why this has always been a class war. It always will be. And until we are very clear in our language that the Zionist elite Jews are why we have this problem, the Christian Zionists, particularly in the South and in the heartland, they are the flock that is being drawn in by the Hagis and the Austins and the Robertsons of the world. And that's why Tucker Carlson is so dangerous right now, because he's calling that out in such a profound way, to his credit, putting himself in harm's way, just like Candace has put herself in harm's way by saying what needs to be said as far as this is concerned. But in the end, as stereotypical as it may be, you put it all the way at the top. You get all the way to the top, and you get to a elite of elite class of Zionist billionaire oligarchs led by Ellison, continually funded by, you've got Zuckerberg, you've got Gates, who may be the most dangerous billionaire of them all, not just because he's been to Pedo Island, but because the guy's buying up as much land as he could get his hands on, and no one does a thing like that unless they're trying to control the food supply. And you also have people like Musk, who, again, for him, it's all about his career and his business and his money. So initially, what people tend to forget, even though he's been up, Milikowski's behind for so long, is that when this first started, he was against what was going on. He was in favor of Palestinian liberation, but he got his mind right real quick. And so as a result, we are recognizing this cabal of power that is concentrated in the hands of a select few Jewish billionaires who have their little clandestine operations all over the country. Ben Shapiro is a traitor to America as far as I'm concerned. He should be treated as such.
Absolutely. You sent him to Israel.
And so why are we not being concise about our language? If Bilzerian and Shields and anybody else is concerned about whether or not we unwrap this relationship, we can, but we have to be crystal clear that there are millions of anti-Zionist Jews in this country who want no part of this shit. And Jen is one of the most active voice. That's Jen. She's doing production tonight. So she is, without question, been leading that effort. And if we ever had a chance to speak with Bilzerian or Shields or anybody in that class, I would just tell them, this is why they are still holding on to power. When you say it's a Jew problem, you give all the power back to the Zionists. They love it when you say that shit. When you do not identify it as an elitist problem, as an elite Jewish problem, if you do it that way, then they have nowhere to go, because then they're really stuck. What are they going to say? That we're worth, Larry Ellison is worth, what, $300 billion? He's about to buy HBO, CNN, and Warner Brothers. He's got CBS and he's got TikTok. You think he's going to stop? He'll get them all. He'll be just like Rupert Murdoch. He's not going to slow down. Trump is open for business, pure and simple. So if somebody else opens up their doors and they're like, hey, you got 40 billion for me too? Yeah, of course. That is without having a proper balance, you now have a free-for-all. And now you're allowing these guys to take over. So if we want to stop them, we can. But we have to rally this country, and that involves displaying the difference between Zionists and anti-Zionists. And I think the language is very imperative that we distinguish between the two. I don't hear it from them. I don't want to assume that they're just anti-Jew. Whatever the case is, I think if we are going to unite as many people as we need in order to break this stranglehold, it's going to require a different nuanced language in terms of how we go after them. If we do that, then I think that the Zionist billionaires are sitting ducks as far as I'm concerned. That's my thought.
Yeah, I think there has been this creation of this meme culture that is just anti-Jew, and you see people making fun of just regular Jews walking down the street. And people will call me an anti-Semite all the time. It's whatever. It's a part of the game. You talk about Israel, you're going to be called an anti-Semite. But I have defended my position on this, that I don't just hate Jews. I have Jewish friends in the community that I'm close with, that I talk to, that I've worked with, that are doing great work against what's going on. And it's not just like every Jew out there is a bad person. I disagree with the Talmud, sure, of course. But there's Jews who are contributing to this, who don't like what's going on. And actually, the Jews at the top, the elitist Jew culture, the elitist Jew class, they're the ones who are breeding this anti-Semitism, the real anti-Semitism, because they're pissing everybody off and making all these people create almost like a culture war against just regular Jews. So I don't hate all Jews. I hate the Jewish elite that is buying other people and controlling these corporations and controlling our government. It is an elitist problem. It is an oligarchy in our country. I don't think Elon Musk is a Jew, but people like him, or people who can be bought out by the Jews, the elitist Jews, those are people who are the problem. So we do need to be concise and clear with our verbiage and how we're speaking about them, because, again, we shouldn't be going after the common folk. We shouldn't be going after our neighbors. We should be going after the people at the top and give them the pressure.
I do think that if we can get, look, it's not easy. Trust me. I see it all the time. I hear all the commentary. I was listening to something earlier with Francesca Fiorentini and a couple of other people. And I'm just thinking, all right, are they getting it yet? Are they getting it yet? And my attitude is, no, they're not getting it. They're still not getting it. They still don't understand that when somebody's on your side, they're on your side because this is the issue of our time. With all due respect, if we do not deal with this unholy alliance right now, it is the end of the United States of America as you know it, because they will drag us to hell with them. They're already doing it. Netanyahu is, of all the world leaders, the first person I think of who's most likely to drop a nuclear weapon if they get back into a war. Yeah. He's the most dangerous man alive as far as I'm concerned. So if we are going to allow them to continue to do what they're doing, it is our asses that are going with them. And so when I hear people say, oh, I don't like Tucker Carlson, I don't like Candace Owens, I'm like, you are why we can't have nice things. I have big disagreements with Tucker Carlson and with Candace Owens, and I will stand side by side with them on the front lines and risk getting myself killed because they're willing to do the same thing to save this country. They understand what's going on here. They understand that if we don't sever this relationship, the United States of America will become a thing of the past in so many ways. You think our economic problems are bad now? You just wait until the dollar gets devalued because of the concentration of power amongst BRICS, because that's what's going to happen. And if we can untie this relationship, we can make it America first, but we can also make it so that we can actually do business with countries around the world again, so that our dollar and our country as a whole still holds value. So many of these other nations around the world are trying to figure out how the hell do we stop doing business with the United States. That should scare the ever-living shit out of everybody, because the only way that's going to be prevented is if we excommunicate this relationship with Israel. If we do that, then we might have a chance. But if we don't, we sure as hell are going there. That's where we're going. And that's my fear, which is why, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, comfort is a privilege. It is not a right. You do not have the right to be comfortable. And especially if the overwhelming majority of people that live in this country are living moment to moment, you do not have the right to be comfortable. And I will see to it that you're not. So how do we, in conclusion, continue to foster these relationships as needed and continue to build them? I believe that more people need to be coming to Washington, D.C. and marching on the Capitol. I think more people need to be connecting there, because that's where all these decisions are made. And there's one thing I'm sure you've learned since you've been marching around the 2-mile perimeter of the U.S. Capitol. These federally elected representatives, they don't like to be bothered. They don't want to be inconvenienced. You're just a couple of commoners. Get out of my way. What are they going to do when 10 or 20,000 people are there every single day? They're going to have a heart attack. So how do we get everyone to the Capitol? To me, that I think is a huge part of our future in terms of how we get some type of an influential power vacuum within DC. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I live in DC. I go to a lot of protests that happen because I'm plugged into the activism community. I know a lot of people that will come from out of state to protest. Anthony and my friend Josie being some of those people, they'll come here from multiple states away and protest. And I would love to see more people at the Capitol. You know, sometimes I'll go and there's only 5 of us. Sometimes I go and there's 50. So I would love to see more Americans getting involved and actually coming to the Capitol. You know, I think protests in maybe like Detroit, Michigan, sure, is it going to do something? Maybe, but it's going to be much more impactful if those people make the trip over here to DC and actually start pestering the people who are causing the problems. Because like you said, they hate to see us in their offices. They hate to see us going into the halls of the Capitol and bothering them and putting cameras in their face. They don't like that. So if we actually got more people, if you want to, if you think protesting is going to work, this is where protesting is going to work, at the Capitol. So yes, I would love to see more people come here. Maybe that's something I need to organize myself because I do live here. But as you said earlier, yes, they're going to drag us down to hell with them because they are using us to radicalize a bunch of people against us. Those bombs being dropped on Gaza, those bombs have the USA written on it. It doesn't have Israel written on it. It has USA, manufactured in America. Those bombs are supplied by us. We're radicalizing people because of our support for Israel. And we're radicalizing a bunch of other countries. A bunch of countries are not just pissed at Israel, but they're pissed off at America too. So we need to, the issue is, if you look at people in Gaza, they're looking at the Israelis bombing them, but they're pissed off at America too, right? Because we're bombing them. All these other countries are pissed off at us. So if we don't get our politicians in line, we're going to separate ourselves from the world market. We're going to piss off a bunch more countries like we did in Iraq, and that's going to radicalize other countries and other people. You know, you go in there and you bomb a family's home and you leave the son behind. He's going to turn into a terrorist that's going to hate America next.
Jen likes to say, one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. And I think that that's what's been lost on a lot of people for a long time. I will say that in terms of the people that really need to be in DC, I believe a lot of veterans and current active members, I don't know how much they can get away with, probably not much. But I do believe that the other factor in DC in particular is the cost. So if there was even something like a barracks where people could come in, they could rotate out when they need to, have a place that they can stay. So that way they don't have to be paying the absurd prices for, let's say, a hotel in DC proper or Northern Virginia or Southern Maryland. If they had that option, with all due respect, I've been to the 8th and 9th Ward. It's not very safe. I would want to make sure that if people are going to come there and are going to want to make an impact, there has to be a plan to how to properly deal with the cost factor of coming to DC. If that is figured out, then that's what's going to make the difference. People will I guarantee you, brother, there will be thousands of people that will venture to the nation's capital if they just knew how they were going to deal with overnight stay. If that's something that can be dealt with in a very equitable way, you won't know what you will have more than you know what to do with in terms of people that will be coming to the city to make it known that the way our government is run is no longer going to be tolerated. We already know what happened, regardless of what people think about January 6th. And I definitely agree that it was not a good, that was not good that what happened. However, you cannot deny that there was not a ton of feds that were egging on that entire situation.
Yeah.
There are people that will also go to the Capitol to try to deal with this situation, and they'll try to turn it into that same situation all over again. We have to be clear as day that this is not about creating another one of those scenarios. This is about how are we going to take back this country? We're going to take it back when the people that are in charge fear the people and not the other way around. That's the only way. That's when it's going to become so overwhelmingly a problem for them. Listen, I'm sure that somebody's going to see this podcast and it's going to get reported 1,000 times over, and it might get demonetized, or I might shut my channel down. Jen and I are waiting for it. We already know that that's a very real possibility. But if you take anything away from what I just said, remember, there are a hell of a lot more of us than there are of them. We just have to figure out how to set those differences aside. I'd like to think this conversation has at least started that conversation in earnest with another group of people. You have a lot of people that follow you. We are slowly but surely building up our following here. I hope that we can collaborate again going forward. And if there's anything that we could do to figure out how to make this relationship severed between the United States and Israel and make this the United States of America again instead of the United States of Israel, then I think we're on the right path. And I can't thank you enough for all that you're doing, much like Anthony is doing, to try to save our country. It is a thankless job in many respects, but just know you have my respect. I'm sure you have Jen's respect, and you have our chat's respect as well, even if we don't agree on everything. But we sure as hell agree on this.
Of course. Thank you for having me. And one more closing statement that I want to make was to piggyback off what you just said is our country's on fire. And if we want to put the fire out, we need to work together, regardless of our differences, to gather buckets of water and put this fire out. So if that's something that needs to happen, if I need to be the one to organize some sort of logistics for a barracks for people to come to, and people can organize under one roof, we need to put our differences aside as liberals or conservatives or right or left or whatever, gay, straight, Christian, it does not matter. This country is on fucking fire, and we need to put the fire out right now. So if we can put our differences aside and just decide that we're going to put this one fire out and figure out our differences later, that's what we need to do. And that's what this whole like Free Palestine movement has been. I have worked with liberals and conservatives on the farthest extremes you can think of. I don't give a shit. All I care about is making sure the people of Palestine are free and liberated from this Zionist regime. I don't care what else you think. I don't care if your favorite color is purple, green, yellow, or if you're straight, gay, bi. I don't care. We need to help these people and put this fucking fire out. Same thing in this country. And we need to rally behind that concept and that idea. And if I need to put something together, I will. And we can talk further on that.
Clyde, how can people follow your work and what you're doing, and make sure that if there is any additional information aside from Instagram, please share it before you go?
Yeah, so my Instagram, that's my main page. It is going to be _TheRealClyde_. That's my really the main page that I'm on. I hope to be getting on YouTube or Rumble here soon. But if anybody wants to find me, you can find me over there on Instagram.
Well, you will always have an invitation to come onto our channel if it is going to help you boost your network, and vice versa. We will do some clips. And there it is, guys, right there on Instagram, The Real Clyde, Clyde Bosch. Again, thank you for all that you do. It really has been a lively conversation. I enjoyed it. I hope you did as well. Thank you again, and we will be talking again real soon.
Thanks for having me, brother. It's good talking to you.
Great evening. So there you go, guys. And I hope you've all enjoyed it to this point. We've got one more story to go. But if you are so inclined, and we certainly hope that you are, and you've been with us this evening, we were topping out around 600 viewers tonight, which is always great. We've got 469 in the chat right now. Make sure you go over to patreon.com/revolutionary change for as little as $5 a month. You can become a supporter of our small but mighty and growing channel. And we certainly are at a point right now where we've had a decent amount of super chats. So we got to get to them. So let's hit them up. Jim Talib with the $5 super sticker. Always a pleasure, and we really appreciate you being here as always. New member, Doom Kid 1331. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining. We are growing by the minute with our YouTube members. That really helps. And Doom Kid 1331 with the $9.99. We have to do everything in our power to stop these devil-worshipping Zionist Fs. I agree. That is what we need to do. Billy Ray, thank you for the 99 super sticker. Appreciate you being here, my friend. Emily 70 with the 10 Canadian A. Can't believe CBC in Canada allowed this show to air. Are charities getting tax breaks for funding illegal West Bank settlements? Of course, there is no question. Look, as I said at the top regarding the systemic control that exists within the Zionist brigade, there is no question that these sort of, as I mentioned earlier, clandestine operations that have been going on within our country, these are years upon years in the making. They didn't just happen yesterday. A lot of people think, oh, Larry Ellison or David Ellison is buying up CBS News. They've been planning this for years. They're just feeling a much greater sense of urgency to deal with it now because of the fact that the narrative against Israel is shifting in a very dramatic way. So that in itself has a lot to do with why this is happening. So keep that in mind. Everybody keep that in mind. Very important. Wicked Melon, thank you for becoming a YouTube member. We really appreciate it. And next we have Lounge66. Always a pleasure. Really appreciate the 10 pounds from across the pond. Do not give money to Breakthrough News. Interesting. Notice their uncritical promotion of no kings. It is left boundary policing. Follow the money. Instead, support revolutionary change. Listen, I don't like hearing that Ranya's channel was in any way promoting the No Kings March. We will talk about this on Monday with Jen. But remember this about the No Kings March, ladies and gentlemen. You do not ask for permission to march. When you ask for permission, you get no kings. When you don't ask for permission, you get the freedom flotillas that got intercepted going to Gaza with aid. That's the difference. Don't ever forget that. Sammy73 with the I don't know what DKK20 actually is, but I appreciate it anyway. Trump, F Zionism, F billionaires. Now, that's a triumvirate that I can get on with. And, of course, Arthur Handy. I believe this is your first time. I could be wrong, but thank you very, very much for the $10. I'm a huge proponent of healthy living, but that's not the solution to an anti-human system that makes people physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually sick. I agree. That's why we need single payer. Sammy K again with the 20 DKK. This is a great show. We appreciate you being here, Sammy, very, very much. And finally, Libertarian Social Democrat with the $4.99. The left and right libertarian should join forces to abolish the DHS, ICE, and bring back INS under DOJ and Customs under the Department of Treasury. All sounds good to me, my friend. I got no complaints. I think we can all agree on those. I hope so. I mean, I can't be certain, but I would imagine that a lot of people do agree. So thank you very much for that contribution. It really does mean a lot. And so again, if you are so inclined, please make sure that you do go over to patreon.com/revolutionary change for as little as $5 a month. You can become a supporter of our small but mighty and growing channel. Thank you very much. We have one more story to cover this evening, and it is one that I think a lot of people. Here's what I would say, my friend: isn't any action better than none? Action only matters if it has consistency. Anybody can get up, for one day, for a few hours, and march and make their presence felt. And I get that. That, to me, is something that happens every so often. You had whatever the pink hat wearers it was called, their march. I mean, I've been a part of them, the George Floyd march. And in the end, I'm not going to say it's all cosplaying, but there's no follow through. It's only temporary. It's self-important theater with the permission of the state. Unless you're actually getting in their way, you're not doing anything. The complete surprise of how big the Free Palestine March in D.C. was so scary to the establishment that they felt that they absolutely had to have a pro-Israel march in the city, completely controlled, shortly thereafter. That scared them. And the follow-up has been fierce. It takes time, but we have been relentless in making sure that we unwind this unholy alliance with the state of Israel. Now, as we conclude the evening, it is very important to remember where so many of these conversations that were had about Charlie Kirk are not lost on everyday people, because the intention is to not figure out just how deep the rabbit hole goes with why somebody who had as big an influence over Christian Zionism in the United States, as Charlie did, is the reason how we ended up where we ended up. And that brings me to the next person on the deep dive list, and that, of course, is Josh Hammer. Now, I had covered what had happened with Charlie Kirk regarding the Zionists and how they felt about him bringing Dave Smith to the final rendition of the Turning Point USA conference. And when he was on stage, he debated Josh Hammer. And here's a snippet of what Josh Hammer had to say during that debate.
While no one should be afraid of debate, and this debate is a nice thing here, the MAGA movement is actually quite unified. Believe it or not, all the talk to the contrary when it comes to these issues. An overwhelming majority of self-identified MAGA Republicans support close U.S.-Israel relations.
Now, we all know that's bullshit. And keep in mind, this is a statement that was made by Josh Hammer before Charlie Kirk was assassinated. So, already putting out the smoke signal of MAGA supports Israel. No, he doesn't. Or no, they don't. I know you do, Josh Hammer. But in this case, he's using the Turning Point USA platform to discuss why we should not. Sure, Josh Scammer, that's a good one. This is an elitist if there ever was, and he's got a lot more to say. But again, right out of the box, he's letting you know that everything is fine with the U.S. and Israel. Even though we're almost, or at this point, we were almost 2 years in to a genocide, of which, of course, he denies. This is a key to unlocking the real problem here. More to go.
According to a CBS News poll, moreover, after the recent Operation Midnight Hammer B-2 bombers in Iran, 94% of self-identified MAGA Republicans supported President Trump's dropping those B-2 bombs on Fort Natanz and the other Iranian facilities there. This is a wildly popular policy there. What did Dave Smith say about this? He re-upped his now years-long crusade to call for Donald Trump's impeachment. Y'all probably don't know that about Dave Smith, do you? He's now called for Donald Trump to be impeached multiple times. But
I would say that Trump, after what he just said at the Knesset the other day, would be grounds for impeachment because he admitted that he is under the thumb of a foreign government. You know, they tried so hard for so long to prove that Trump was a Russian asset or a tool of Putin, blah, 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 blah. But all the while, we all knew that there was only one country that had his, command. And that, of course, was Israel, the country that he's espousing all the support in the world for it. Bullshit. And I like Dave Smith, by the way.
Dave, look, I don't like when people misquote me either. You probably don't like when people misquote you. So I actually have a little bit of a highlight reel here of Dave Smith's tweets over the years. Dave Smith, March 19th, 2024. Donald Trump is responsible for around 500,000 deaths in Yemen, and between the weapons to Ukraine and the Abraham Accords Jerusalem embassy, he is at least partially responsible for the two worst humanitarian crises in the world. He's a war criminal who should spend his life in prison.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, that seems very reasonable. And you can say that about every president in the United States since JFK. So what's the problem? Do you want to hear this terrible thing he said about our dear leader?
He is calling Donald Trump a war criminal who should spend his life in prison. You should be livid at that. I am livid at that as a Trump supporter. Donald Trump, Dave Smith, June 16, 2025. Trump allegedly had full prior knowledge of Israel's attacks and gave it his blessing while pretending to be negotiating with the Iranians as a cover. If this is true, Trump is the most impotent bitch of a leader imaginable. He's calling our president, the greatest president in my lifetime, an impotent bitch. Are you kidding me? June 20.
I'm so offended. The only bitch I see is the bitch with the piece of paper speaking right now. My God, are you a bitch?
21st, 2025, Donald Trump has now launched an illegal war of aggression against Iran. The risk of an absolute catastrophe is very high and the benefits are non-existent. Dave Smith, June 21st. Dead wrong. This notion that World War III would start, not a single American casualty. We should be celebrating that. Donald Trump fulfilled multiple campaign promises. The escalator speech in 2015 at Trump Tower, he literally said, I'm not going to let Iran get a nuclear weapon. And guess what? He said, I oppose a neoconservative foreign policy. He did both of those things with Iran. He deprived the Iranian regime of nuclear weapon while not losing a single American sailor, soldier, or Marine while depriving them of nuclear weapons. And finally, on this. Dave Smith, July 8th, 2025. In the last month, Donald Trump has launched a war of aggression on behalf of a foreign government, exploded the debt, announced that he's continuing the Biden policy of arming Ukraine, and covered up a giant child rape operation. So according to my interlocutor, Donald Trump is not just engaging in wars on behalf of a foreign government, he is also covering up the world's giant pedophilic child sex trafficking ring, allegedly, I presume, on behalf of a foreign government as well. So
Well, yes, I would say that is 100% correct. They are covering up a child sex trafficking ring led by Jeffrey Epstein. And you know that, Josh Hammer, and you're covering up for that. I mean, I don't want to make any presumptions about what you may or may not have known or were doing with Jeffrey Epstein. But anybody who wants to sit on stage and defend Jeffrey Epstein, not the best look. We must release the Epstein files, but as long as somebody like Josh Hammer is involved in this process, that is not going to happen. Now, I don't know how many of you know who Josh Hammer is. He is an attorney by trade. He's a political commentator. He's also a columnist. He grew up in Westchester County, New York, in a very affluent upbringing that saw him go to Duke and to the University of Chicago Law School. He is an example of what we talk about when we say that there is a difference between regular Jews and elite Jews. And he is one of those elite Jews that is in favor of the disintegration of this country if it is at the behest of Israel. Now, this is the statement that he made sitting on stage across from Dave Smith, and this man's leg right here is Charlie Kirk's. So this is what he said shortly before Charlie's assassination. This is what Josh Hammer had to say just a couple of days ago regarding not only his relationship with Charlie Kirk, but Charlie Kirk's position on the state of Israel. Now it gets even more interesting.
Really only over the past, I don't know, a year and a half or so that I would say that we became closer. I started going on his show, the Charlie Kirk Show, a wildly popular podcast and radio show. I started going on the show more often, and we started talking very frequently. He formed a small group chat. There were probably 7 or 8 of us total in this group chat there. He called it his brain trust for thinking about Israel, for thinking about Jewish-Christian relations. He was very concerned about rising anti-Semitism. This is something that he was an adamant opponent of. It is Charlie, if you look at campus talks for the past couple of years, he wasn't just getting asked about Israel. He was not just getting asked about two-state solution, about Gaza, borders, all this stuff there. No, he was getting asked about like the Talmud, which is crazy. And he actually was able to provide very good answers, better answers than probably 98% of Jews probably could offer there. So we talked a little bit about that sort of stuff, frankly. But above all, we really strategized about how to turn back the tide against rising anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment on the American right in Republican Party circles among young Gen Z conservative activists there. And it got to the point where these campus talks that Charlie was doing, give or take, these are his words, not mine, he would say that roughly half, 50% of the questions that he got asked were all on Israel, Jews, which first of all is disturbing. It's mind-boggling.
I don't know who this lady is, but why is it disturbing? What are you, living under a rock? Listen, it's one thing to just support the state of Israel unconditionally. It's another thing entirely to pretend that this is not the most critical issue facing this country in this moment. That is reflective in what conservative politicos want to talk about. So you can't just frame it as, oh, it's a bunch of hippie lefties who are anti-war and that's the reason they care about it. No, it runs a hell of a lot deeper than that. And so to pretend to play dumb only makes you look more guilty. So that should come as no surprise.
It's frankly disturbing. That is not a sign of a healthy society. So that's sobering in and of itself. But because of that, he did organize this Zoom call the night before he tragically was murdered. So the Utah Valley University event where he tragically was killed, just a day that will live in infamy, to borrow the FDR phrase from many decades ago. So that was supposed to be the first of a series of events, supposed to be the first launching a campus tour. So basically before he set foot at the first event, he wanted kind of an hour-long kind of prep call. So it was me, a right-wing rabbi friend of mine who lives in Jerusalem, Pesach Wilicki, a couple of his producers, and there was one Christian pastor, and that was basically it. And Charlie had a list of questions. How do I respond when the students ask me about starvation, famine, genocide, borders, two-state solution, this, that, there. But the mere fact that he was seeking our counsel, and we communicated on a virtually daily basis through.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say he never seeked out your counsel, especially you. You are an empty vessel if there ever was one. You're actually a knockoff Ben Shapiro. I finally got it. That's all you are. I don't for a second believe that this guy in any, I do believe that there were members of the Zionist brigade that had Charlie's ear, and probably in a very big way for a long time, but I think it went a lot higher than Josh Hammer. But to use the term seeking counsel, that is boosting yourself up a lot. But he's got a little more to say.
Through this active group chat and one-on-one. The fact that we were doing that, along the fact that he had that particular Zoom call with people like me the night before he was killed, I think really profoundly calls into question this narrative that he was getting ready to renounce his well-established lifelong support for the Jewish people, for the state of Israel.
Now, of course, he makes this statement about whether or not Charlie Kirk had stepped away. And he's making this statement after Candace Owens revealed the group chat exchange with Josh Hammer, Bill Ackman, Andrew Colvett, the guy who's the head of Seth Dillon. So why is he saying this? Why does he feel the need to go and make this statement when it's obvious that he is not going to be able to hide it? It's already out there. He was a part of this group. And Candace has the receipts that shows that Charlie didn't want anything to do with these guys anymore. He had had enough. So why would Hammer feel the need to say this? We're going to conclude this with Candace Owens, who, keep in mind, I don't know what's happened to her. I haven't seen anything from her in several days. I would be concerned. She did say, if anything happens to me, you know who to blame. Well, we sure do.
For weeks after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, Josh Hammer obsessively and shamelessly accused people of lying, people of grifting, people of attempting to destroy Charlie Kirk's legacy. Charlie Kirk was his friend, he claimed rather maniacally, that Charlie never once flinched on the topic of Israel. He died just loving Israel. It was like, are you kidding me? That's all he cared about. Check out just some of these tweets, by the way. This is a collage. We just don't have all day here to gather crazy Josh Hammer tweets, but you get the idea. There is a repulsive op right now to hijack Charlie Kirk's legacy. There is a repulsive op right now desecrating Charlie's memory by trying to posthumously convert him to Groyperism. Can't believe there's something known as Groyperism. I was given access to this letter a few months ago, and I read it at that.
I just have to pause this here because if there's one thing that I know, and I am not a big follower of all these content creators and what they say on a daily basis, but if there's one thing that I think anybody is aware of when it comes to conservative Inc., if you want to call it that, Charlie Kirk and Nick Fuentes did not like each other even a little bit. So the idea that Josh Hammer is accusing Charlie Kirk, or in this case, the suggestion of Candace Owens, that all of a sudden that Charlie was becoming a Groyper. I don't know where the hell he pulls that shit out of his ass. But even that makes him look even more like a dumbass and an amateur. Because he is. All of these signs point to a spiral that they cannot get themselves out of. They're probably just better off not saying anything. But in Hammer's case, he can't help himself.
Time, Tucker, Candace, and other bad faith actors are lying through their teeth about Charlie and Israel. Candace Owens and other grifters, you get that back up for a quick second. Candace Owens and other grifters are trying to posthumously rewrite and hijack the legacy of the great Charlie Kirk to further their patently evil ends. There has been a repulsive op. The reality is simple. Charlie was a bridge. Like, it's weird that he keeps repeating that sentence. Like I said, maniacal, obsessed. And of course, in the comfort of his own derangement and with the full support of the press and the silence of Charlie's other quote unquote friends, Josh was really acting the part of a true Pharisee. He was certain that the truth would not rise again. He was so confident that he had killed it and that he could himself hijack the legacy of Charlie Kirk. Except the truth did kind of rise again. It kind of always does rise again. And the world now knows that Josh Hammer had personal, intimate knowledge that Charlie's views were changing. He lied about the Hamptons meeting. I've told you the truth from day one. Seth Dillon and Josh were personally upset with Charlie's defiance against the state of Israel. Seth Dillon was the more vocal of the two parties in the Hamptons, as I said, in terms of actually pressing Charlie, but both of them were upset about the way that they saw his viewpoints shifting. And Tucker was therefore correct at Charlie Kirk's memorial. It was definitely the correct analogy when he spoke about these sorts of individuals who plot and lie and think that they are going to be successful in, well, murdering the truth in the story of Jesus Christ. Take a listen.
So that's where that concludes. And we know what Tucker Carlson ultimately ended up saying at the funeral, or, celebration of life, whatever you want to call it. But remember, it's Josh Hammer, Seth Dillon, Bill Ackman. Again, they're all connected. It's all connected. There is no sweeping this under the rug. The truth will eventually set us all free. And as I said, I'm not a supporter of Charlie Kirk, but I am a supporter of ending this genocidal relationship with Israel. So it's our job to show that everyone who is involved in this has some way, shape, or form tied directly to the state of Israel, and that's why we're here. So for those who want to know how we sever this unholy alliance as quickly as possible, this is how we do it. Charlie Kirk's story holds the key to so much of this. If you guys have enjoyed this show this evening, I hope you will also consider not only liking the stream, subscribing to the channel, sharing the stream, and also contributing over at patreon.com/revolutionary change. But also, if you are so inclined, click that QR code and check out our website, revolutionarychangepac.org, and learn more about how we are using our platform to help disassemble this relationship between the U.S. and Israel. That's our job. As of this moment, I can tell you guys this evening, we did, as I mentioned earlier this evening, past the 78,000 subscriber marker. So we are going up the ladder. We're going to get to that 100,000 mark soon enough. But as of right now, we currently our current subscriber count, I should say, currently sits at 78,102. So little by little, we continue to rise, and it's because of you guys supporting our efforts in order to do so. I can't thank you all enough for your amazing support. We sat very comfortably at over 600 streamers, live viewers this evening. And again, if you are new here, we live stream on Saturday, Monday, and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Jen will be with us on Monday evening. We are going to have a number of key stories to talk about, not the least of which is Code Pink, covering one of the very first, but hopefully not the last, congressional representatives, in this case, Seth Moulton, Democrat of the state of Massachusetts, saying, not only am I not taking any more money from the Israel lobby, I'm giving all of the Israel lobby money back. That's good. That's a start. We're going to talk about ICE and how they think they're above the law. There will be other stories to cover. But if you enjoy this channel, which we hope that you do, we are extremely grateful for each and every one of you who take the time to become a part of this community. It means a lot to us. We have a lot of plans, a lot of goals that we've set forth going forward. And I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Clyde this evening, even though politically he may not be everybody's cup of tea. But I think these conversations are very necessary. And that, beyond anything else, is how we're going to not only disassemble this relationship with the genocidal state of Israel, it is the only way that we will save our republic, if we're lucky. Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things we ask you to do. We love you all. We'll see you Monday, and free Palestine. Good night, guys.